Today on the CEO Barbecue, we'll be looking for gold and copper in the Atacama region of Chile together with San Lorenzo Gold. If you want a bullet point summary of this conversation and all the other CEO barbecues in your inbox once a week, go to researchtalks.com and subscribe to our free newsletter. Now, the company you're about to hear from has paid us for the production of this video, which means that this is not research, it's an advertisement, and you should treat it as such. Research is conducted by reading the company's official filings, which you can find on setterplus.ca. And please only watch this if you absolutely know what you're doing. This interview is intended only for experienced junior mining speculators because mineral exploration, development, and mining is a very tough business where failure is the norm and should be the expectation. This is going to be a conversation that is general and impersonal in nature, containing forward-looking statements. I am not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased in multiple ways. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital might be at risk. If you're not 100% sure you understand 100% of the disclaimers I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said therein. That all said, San Lorenzo has multiple gold and copper targets on a 9,000 hectare land package in the Atacama Desert, which is located, of course, in northern Chile along the Pacific coast. And it borders the Andes Mountains to the east. It's about 15 kilometers south of Codelco's El Salvador copper gold porphyry mine there. And it's also roughly 30 kilometers from the Potrerillos smelter. I'm probably butchering that name, but I'm not going to pull out my best Spanish accent for this conversation. Maybe another time. The core of the current thesis for San Lorenzo is really, they have a couple of targets. So they got 4 targets that are of merit here that we'll talk about. But the core is essentially target number 1. It's called Cerro Blanco, and the company describes it as a gold-rich porphyry system, although the jury is still out on whether this actually is a porphyry. So we'll talk about that as well. Some intercepts came in as high as a gram per ton over 153 meters in the discovery hole, which is actually what brought this to my attention as well. There is a large alteration footprint at surface here, and management links the intercepts and the alteration to a deep IP chargeability, which they think is a potassic alteration at depth, which could be a vector to a possible porphyry core. Rigs on site right now, positioned to test the strongest of those chargeability segments next, hoping that they'll be able to find something that's hopefully similar to El Salvador and thus containing serious scale. And we'll talk about that, of course. Is that mineralization and that core too deep, though? And will the current drill program answer those unanswered questions is, of course, something I'm going to be asking about in the conversation. Target 2 is Arco de Oro. That's an epithermal vein corridor with higher grade gold being intercepted along a 1.2 kilometer stretch of what is believed to be a 5 kilometer trend, with the most recent drilling showing 4.5 meters of 6.5 grams of gold and peak values of almost 18 grams per ton. Target 3 is fittingly Tres Amigos, which is a copper-rich epithermal system with some historic production from the oxide part of the mineralized zone and some past drilling showing 34 meters at 1.5% copper there. And last, but maybe not least, Target 4 is called Caballo Muerto. This is another potential porphyry target that San Lorenzo has, where 122 meter interval came up with almost 1.5 grams in the discovery hole. So there's an IP ongoing here, and some more drilling might be in order, but hopefully more about that later on in the conversation. Now, San Lorenzo is listed as SLG on the TSX Ventures Exchange, where the average 3-month volume is about 190,000 shares. The stock's 52-week high is 79 cents and its 52-week low is 5 cents. With a market cap of just over 55 million Canadian dollars and just over 80 million shares outstanding, today this is a 70-cent stock with a 50 and a 200-day moving average at respectively 52 and 28 cents, which means the stock is now trading well above both of them and thus indicating a positive upward momentum. Moving on to the share structure, there are no warrants outstanding. There are just about 3 million options exercisable at 16 cents per share. So the number of fully diluted shares is close to the number of the shares outstanding. We're talking 83 million here, meaning an increase of just about 3.5% in shares outstanding could happen if all the dilutive securities get exercised, which would then result in about a 3% ownership dilution if, and of course, always a big if, but if all dilutive securities get exercised. And of course, none of this accounts for potential dilution down the road which is not unlikely given that this is a pre-revenue company that operates in a capital-intensive industry. Talking about capital, I'll now go through their latest financial statements, which shows me the numbers as of June 30, which is now almost 4 months ago. And at the time, the company had in total about $1 million Canadian dollars in current assets. It was mostly in the form of cash. In terms of liabilities, although unusual for an Explorico, San Lorenzo does have some debt. There's on the current side of the liability side of the balance sheet. At the end of June, there was still about $1.5 million open, though notably, basically all of that is due to related parties or their note payables. Largest part is due to Lithium Chile. It's a $1 million payable, which was renegotiated some 3 years ago, but that is now due by the end of this year, and it carries an 8% annual interest to it. There's also an insider facility converted to a term loan where essentially some debt plus advances to, I believe, Al here, were rolled into a credit facility about a year ago. So max $1 million, 8% annually, secured by a GSA convertible with 20 cents for 2 years. That auto convert once max into that, again, term loan here, maturing on November 30, 2026. But then subsequently on August 5, the same director, so again, I believe it's Al, provided a second credit facility up to $1 million, 8% again, only convertible at 35 cents this time, which when fully drawn, it could auto convert into, again, a term loan maturing on July 31st, 2027 with a 1-year contractual hold on any conversion shares. All in all, bottom line, about $2.1 million of debt here. And I believe, again, it's the CEO who holds a part of those loans. So as you can figure, not a simple situation. Hopefully, I'll be able to get some more details on it later on from Al himself. Moving on to the P&L for the 6 months that ended on June 30, the total amount recorded as expenses for the period shows up as $315,000, although that includes some non-cash expenses, share-based compensation, and some accretion. So the actual out-of-pocket cost was, call it, $295. It means the average cost for the period was about $50,000 a month, consisting for 70% of G&A, and the rest is the interest on the different debts. And fortunately, no breakdown on the G&A, but I'll be asking about the way they plan on spending money in the future later on in the conversation as well. This is an exploration company, so they also spend money on drilling and geology, of course, but those expenses get capitalized. So we can find some more details under note 4 in the financials, where I can see that the additions for the period were $608,000. But again, unfortunately, no breakdown for this either, although I assume a large part of this was actual drilling, given that there was an ongoing drill program during this reporting period. This is where I normally provide the drilling to marketing ratio, which looks at how much money a company spends on marketing versus how much they actually spend on their main business activity. But again, I don't have that breakdown right now. I do have the overall administration to exploration ratio here. That was about 2. And it means that twice as much money was spent on exploration as it was spent on administration, or in percentage terms, 66% of the money was spent on exploration. As always, though, I'd like to remind you that the exploration businesses can change relatively quickly, so these numbers may not be entirely representative of the current or the future situation for San Lorenzo. So go to setterplus.ca and look at the numbers yourself. Now, I've been referencing a conversation here, but for this to actually become a conversation, I'm going to have to shut up already. And Al, I'll give you the word here. But first of all, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Well, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Pleasure is mine. And although this has been a highly requested interview, really for I think over a year now, this is actually your first time on the barbecue. So we have to go through the smell test first. Starting off with yourself, who are you? What's your track record? And have you, more importantly, made more money for shareholders than what you've spent during your career so far?
I have. My background is oil and gas, principally. Been involved in the resource sector, especially oil and gas, since about 1980. Pivoted a little bit towards the mining sector in 2009, but the bulk of my time was on oil and gas, based out of Calgary. Involved in the startup of a number of junior oil and gas companies that ended up getting sold to larger entities. Mm-hmm. The background is in engineering, chemical engineering, I guess, to start with. Not so sure I practice any of that anymore, but I've been more in the administration side and just resource hunting for the last many years.
Mm-hmm. Do you currently do anything else? Do you have any other executive or board positions with other companies?
I have no other executive positions, but I do sit on a few other boards that are involved in mineral exploration.
Mm-hmm. Does that take up any of your time, or how much of your time would you guess goes towards San Lorenzo?
Oh, 80% of my time goes to San Lorenzo.
Okay. How much of your time goes to cycling? I think I can see a cycle tire there up in the corner.
Oh, not a lot. A little bit, but not very much.
Jokes aside, do you now that you're CEO, is this your first time being CEO of a exploration company? So everything before this was oil and gas, and this is your first time in exploration. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Do
That's
you,
correct.
do you like it? Essentially, is what I want to ask, or do you plan or want to remain the CEO as the company goes through again this discovery growth process here?
Well, I've been pretty clear, I think, publicly and uh, in meetings that my appointment here is a temporary situation. It, this is going to need someone with a greater skill set in the mining side than I have, which includes capital markets exposure. In other words, a name that's known. Um, I'm taking this on as a labor of love and really enjoy it, and together with my partner Terry Walker in Chile, and we're really having fun with this because the property we're working on really has such great potential. But to properly answer your question, I don't see myself in this role in a year.
That's very specific, and I do appreciate it. I think it's the oil and gas background. I think with mining CEOs, oftentimes I would get a 5 minute answer, and then I would be like, "Did they answer my question? No, they didn't." So I do appreciate the specificity there. Um, how many shares of San Lorenzo do you own right now, and what's the average cost that you've paid for those shares?
It would take me a minute or two to think about the average cost, but we have a substantial position in San Lorenzo. When I say we, I include Terry Walker in Chile, and I also include his and my friends and family. And I would expect that that amount would be very close to 40%, 40.
Hmm. And that's oh, so you said friends and family. So what percentage of that would be reportable?
Reportable by myself. Yeah, you've got me on the spot right now because I don't exactly know that number. But some are held by companies that I'm involved with, but are not in control of. So um,
It's
I'd have to look on seat or on set A. I'm sorry to answer your question properly.
really what I'm looking for here, Al, is or where I'm going with this is, of course, skin in the game. But as I mentioned earlier, you have another layer of skin in this game in San Lorenzo, and that's through the loans that you've been providing for the company. You bankrolled that last draw program essentially, and again, not something typically seen in these companies, and not something that's always looked at positively. So maybe you can talk to me about that. What are your plans for this debt? Will you convert it all, and what are the timelines for those decisions?
Well, let me go back to the start of it. So we were trading at a pretty low share price, 6 cents, approximately 6 to 7 cents, and it's true that we didn't get the story out very well, and that has changed over the last number of months. But certainly, we've been working on it for quite a few years. In fact, since 2013. So we're kind of like one of those 12-year overnight successes, I guess you would say. Um, I've been funding a great amount of the expenditures in the field, which of course is why my share position and Terry's, in fact, are reflected in the numbers that I spoke about a minute ago. But then we we exited that malaise, I guess you'd call it, from 2012-ish to 2017, 18, and felt like maybe it's time to really have a look at this a little stronger. And that included more and more geochem, surface geochem and IP and all the traditional exploration models, including boots on the ground, of course. And with the benefit of moving forward, we've put drills in the hole, and every time we do, it seems like we encounter alteration and mineralization and some really, really great results. So we had a target called Cerro Blanco that we're going to speak about in a moment, I think. That was rather remote. So because of our very small budget, we really didn't have the money to build the road, which we did last summer, and that was 7 kilometers to access this target. And then set up on a drilling program that included that target, Cerro Blanco, and Arco de Oro. And you're right. You asked, did I finance that program? Well, I did because I advanced a $1 million credit facility. Now, I just want to make sure that your viewers know that it's important that everybody can share in the upside here. We had a 6 cent stock price, but made the conversion price 20 cents on the first facility, so that everybody could enjoy a multiple from that position. And yeah, better lucky than good. I don't know. What do you say? The results worked out pretty good, as you alluded to there earlier. And so we did some IP and some more surface geochem, et cetera, over this past summer. And just recently, we've done another $1 million credit facility. The stock was trading at about 21 cents, so we made that convertible at 35 cents. But the whole point is that shareholders would make some money before I would be in the money. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, it all looks so simple, but it's not always quite so simple when you're looking forward. So that's what constitutes our debt. And I hope I answered your question, but yes, we've had some funding from myself in order to avoid significant dilution, especially when we were down at the 6 and 7 cent range, and additionally when we were at the 21 cent range. I feel that it did the shareholders well, and I'm looking forward to continued positive results. You asked me about that debt. Well, it's convertible, and it's quite clear it's going to be converted because it's quite in the money. Clearly, the 20-cent conversion piece is very much in the money, and even the 35-cent conversion piece is in 100% of the money. So, yeah, they're going to be converted, and we're looking forward to completing this next program that we're doing right now of about 10 holes with that second facility and the cash that we received from warrant exercises after the program we completed early this year.
Well, you said you're looking forward to getting good results back from that drilling. What if you don't? What if results are not as good as you hoped it to be? Market maybe not as happy. Would you be there still? Giving loans or loan facilities to the company, or are you at a point where you're like, nope, I'm done now?
Oh, that's the farthest from the case. I'm not looking for or anything here other than to say this is a labor of love. I'm not being paid. Terry Walker's being paid a kind of a pittance, you might say. We're doing this because we love it, and I love the smile on Terry's face when he looks at some of the rock there, and it's great. So, am I going to be there? 100%. I mean, now let's keep in mind when I say that there's some significance to this property and some real inherent value already. So it goes without saying that we're going to back it, and as it moves forward.
I'll table the money talk for a while here, but we'll definitely be back to it once we're talking about your plans or goals for this year. But back to skin in the game here. You mentioned Terry and everything else, or everybody else. Is that it? I mean, it's essentially you and Terry who have the rest of the insider ownership, or what about the other directors and who owns what?
It's principally Terry and myself.
Okay.
Well, and family, friends, right? Family and friends.
Yeah. Talking about other insiders and Terry, do you or any of the other insiders or family or friends personally own a royalty on any of the projects you have?
No.
Good. That's the right answer. I like hearing that.
I would. No.
Maybe coming from oil and gas, that even surprises you that I have to ask it. And it surprises me as well, but I do have to ask it because sometimes it is the case. this is this is all about incentive essentially, which I believe is one of the most important subjects in finance. But so with those talking about insiders, how do you get incentivized? I mean, you say you don't get a pay, and it's a labor of love, but are you going to implement a structure for insiders and executives? Is there going to be a bonus structure? Or are there going to be KPIs implemented or something like that anytime soon? Or are you just going to keep writing it out until a potential resolution?
Well, let me answer that in two parts. When it comes to Terry and myself, what more incentive do we need than a large equity stake? That's what we're doing it for. We're going to be rewarded through our equity. Now, the second part of the answer is, I already alluded to that I'm not going to be here probably in a year in the position of CEO. So will we have to implement a structure that includes bonuses or other incentive plans to attract the right additional people into the team? Yes, of course we will. We don't have that in place right now, other than a simple stock option plan, which has about 40% of what's allowable already issued. And we're going to wait on awarding any other options until perhaps other team members come in at the same time. That timing is subsequent to the drilling program, probably, that we're doing right now, which we think will be between the date of this interview and, so in other words, mid-October. But we'll be drilling right through to Christmas and possibly thereafter with a short break during Christmas time. So I'm trying to really give you a good feel for the timing we're looking at going forward.
That's fair, and we will be talking about the timing. I think this about covers my smell test, if you will. I do want to talk about what you mentioned earlier when I asked you if you'd like to remain the CEO. But how do you see the future of the company, given the context of there being, again, four targets here, and not just the one? I mean, are you looking to make a discovery at Cerro, or grow the discovery at Cerro Blanco and sell the company eventually, or would you want to only sell that target, make other discoveries? Yeah, what's the real goal here?
Well, to look that far forward is going to be very difficult. Our goal is to make discoveries, really create value. We believe we have something special in Salvador. We really do. There's four targets, as you mentioned, but they're not, tiny little things. We're searching for some very significant accumulations. These are big targets. We're early in the game, admittedly, as far as our exploration goes, but I would point out that all of the drilling on the property has been done by us. We're not recycling old holes or anything like that. We're the ones that have done the IP and the boots on the ground geochem and the drilling. So it's an exciting time. And when you've got lots of excitement, it's not like you're planning that far down the road. I'm trying to be candid with the not going to be here in a year in the CEO position. I think every shareholder would be relieved to hear me say, well, let's get a name that's quite well known in the capital markets and in the mining space itself, and bring this to the next step. That's about as far forward as we've gone, other than to know that this property can support an awful lot more than of exploration, than what's going on right now. An awful lot more.
This is actually a good point to do indeed talk about the star of the show here, essentially your flagship target, Cerro Blanco, which is a relatively new discovery. But how come, actually? How come nobody discovered it before you did? What's the history here, and why was it on the market when you picked it up in the first place?
Well, it's been a long process of picking it up, by the way. We started in 2012. So it was a smaller property package at the time, and we've been adding to that property package over this last 12, 13 years to where it is right now. We get asked that question, or I've been asked that question, the oil and gas side a lot. Well, if it's this good, why didn't somebody else do it? Well, you really, you could say that probably about every project in the world, So It's in a great jurisdiction. I would point out that there was quite a malaise in the mining business, between 2012 for the next 5 to 7 years. And we took advantage of that period of time. So we feel very good with the position that we have now. And then again, you can always do the serendipity comment and say, better lucky than good when you get your land position. And that seems to be working out as well.
Mm-hmm. How big could this potential deposit get, or what's your target size? Because you mentioned always that it's going to be, you're not chasing after small things here. That's what you like saying. So, yeah, how big does it have to be to make that strategy or goal happen?
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to just take one quick step back. You mentioned that the star of the show is Cerro Blanco at Salvador. I'm not so sure about that. I personally love Arco de Oro. We believe that we have a very significant resource there already, but I want to make sure that I'm very clear here that that's not a 43-101 compliant comment. But parallel, we'll talk about it in a minute, I'm sure, but parallel intersecting vein systems, hydrothermal vein systems that epithermal in nature that appear to continue for well over 5 kilometers. And you might say, well, how do you know that? Well, we have an additional exploration tool, and that is surface workings along the trend that have been going on. They haven't been going on over the last few decades, but picking arrows over the years. And we've done quite a bit of IP across there and very significant targets of IP across there as well. So I'll stop it there because I'm sure we'll go into it a bit, but that really attracts me as well, Arco de Oro. And very candidly, so does Caballo Muerto, and so does Tres Amigos. So, yes, a lot of people are all over Cerro Blanco saying that's the one you got to go after. You asked me a specific question, how big does it have to be? Well, we're not targeting 1 million ounces. Now, what's this all going to look like at the end of the day? Let's just keep in mind that just to the north, in a very similar geological setting, a caldera collapse zone, the El Salvador mine has produced 24 billion pounds of copper and well over 5 million ounces of gold, I think more than like 6. And I mean, how big does it have to be? Well, we're not looking for 1 million ounces. We're looking for an awful, awful lot more than that. Having said that, we're early in the game.
That's almost an answer, I suppose. I was really looking for you to say I want 5 million ounces and I'm going to have it there by 3 years. But I understand that's not something you can go ahead and say or claim like that. Just before we continue on,
I think I probably could at Arco de Oro, but it's subject to drilling success, of course. But I'm not trying to evade the question. It's too early to be able to say that. It's a big target.
Just before we continue on with Cerro Blanco, what's your favorite target? Which of the 4 would you, if you had to drop all of them and only keep one, which would you keep?
Maya, I sure wouldn't want to do that. In other words, that's not a question I'm in a position to answer. We're fortunate that we hold that land position on all those targets. And the truth is that we have 1 or 2 other targets that have not been drilled yet that look very interesting from surface geochem and from IP. But yeah, what's interesting is that when you talk to people about Salvador, some of them really like Cerro Blanco, and then some of them really like Arco de Oro. And then there's a few people say, that's a sleeper there, that Caballo Muerto. That's probably a deposit already. I can't say that, right? I mean, we all know that, but it's so intriguing. There's multiple events have happened here, and it's just it's a special opportunity, this Salvador.
Well, maybe I'll ask Terry that question once I speak to him next time, what his favorite target is. Back to Cerro Blanco, because that's where the drilling has or is taking place. How much more drilling do you think, and how much more money do you think you'll have to spend on drilling before you can prove up that critical scale, whatever it might be? You know, it said it's not a million ounces, so multi-million ounces. Yeah, how much more drilling? How much more money?
A lot. I don't have a forecast on or an estimate, I'm sorry, on the number of dollars or the number of meters. We all have to acknowledge that drilling success kind of begets more drilling, and we are pretty early in there, but this is a target that commands a lot of attention, demands, not commands, and will require significant exploration efforts on it, and it deserves it.
You're doing some of that right now, or you're about to be doing that, I believe. Rigs on site, I believe, or correct me if I'm wrong, but give me the summary of what's planned there. How many meters? When does it start? When will it be completed?
Well, we've only announced 3 holes at Cerro Blanco. The rig is indeed on and drilling. On the first hole, we will be doing 2 set holes as well, and there is an opportunity perhaps to expand that program by 2 or 3 additional holes. We have budget constraints in the back of our mind and certainly want to test some of the features that we got at Arco de Oro as well. But having said that, we want to test the other targets too. So I'm trying to answer your question as candidly as I can and directly. It's going to take a lot more drilling at Cerro Blanco.
What would it take for you? I mean, if is it only budget constraints that keep you from going, 3 to 5 holes, or what would it take for you to actually go to 5 holes?
Well, going to 5 holes is not a problem in our existing budget. We can do that. It might take away from the drilling that we're going to do at Arco de Oro. I've kind of painted myself into a little bit of a box, not intentionally, and that was that I promised everybody we wouldn't do any kind of financing until we finished this drilling program. Now, I will tell you that there's a lot of pressure from people saying, well, I think you should do a little bit of financing just so that you can keep a rig going 12 months a year and not, after this program shut down. So there's no decision made on that, but any finance that we would do on that would be quite modest, and we're not planning it right now. As of today, I can tell you that we intend to finish this drilling program of 10 holes before we entertain any type of financing.
Help me better understand the strategic decision behind that move, though, because exploration is inherently risky. Most holes don't come up as discoveries in general, as a general term. So why, given where your price is now, I mean, it's ran massively, why not raise now? What's the strategic thinking behind not raising at this value? Like, sure, you could raise it maybe a little bit higher valuation on a confirmation of a step out or something like that. But in terms of risk reward, why not raise now?
It's the perfect question. And, I've made this comment before, not on video, but in life, sometimes you have to make decisions. And, well, you have to make decisions. And sometimes they're the right ones and sometimes they're not. The decision was made to do this drilling program. And whether it was the right decision or the wrong decision, I'm going to suggest to you that the drilling bit is going to be the arbiter of that. So I mentioned earlier that I gave my word we wouldn't do that until the program was completed, and I feel obliged to do that. It's nothing more than that.
That's fair. I respect that you want to stand on your word, essentially. How do you plan on raising capital going forward, though? Are you thinking straight equity? Will there be a warrant? Is there a possibility for JV or just a strategic raise or something like that? Yeah, talk to me about all the options there.
Well, I don't think it should be a surprise to you that we've already been approached by some larger companies with, JV type discussions. We've also been approached by, I don't know if I can count them, people saying we'd like to do a financing, and so far, we've resisted that in furtherance of what we said we're going to finish the drilling program. My number one desire is to create value per share. And so, yes, I agree with you that our stock has performed nicely, and that there would be a strong case for doing a raise. And right now, I just feel like, how do I do that after I told everybody that we would go ahead with this drilling program? Keeping in mind, please, that we do have enough money to do this drilling program.
And also, so the facility that you provide in August, that's being drawn on, and that's essentially what's pushing the company forward, or is that still open right now?
That, together with the warrant money that we got in March, is fully enough to complete this drilling program.
Right. And then once you see what that is, then you do start thinking about or entertaining the idea of getting a strategic in, or not. Would that be of interest to you?
Well, I don't like to shut any doors, of course, right? That would be silly. We're not thinking about it right now because we have a little bit more work to do.
Right.
But when the final bell tolls sometime in the future, it makes an awful lot of sense to have larger entities involved, given their cost of capital compared to what our cost of capital will be. So these are, they're not untypical discussions that you have about your mining projects. And yes, of course, ultimately there will be decisions made that include some of those considerations. Right now, we are not considering that.
Mm-hmm. I would assume you'd have the same answer if I asked you about an asset level deal where you bring in someone as a JV partner, or is that not of interest at all?
I would have to adopt the exact same answer, and I would just want to summarize it. We're just not thinking about that right now. We're thinking right now about this drilling program and continuing with a strategic way of doing things that includes all the steps that you really should take. We would be the first to admit that we need to do more IP. We need to continue our surface grid patterns of geochem. The IP is an interesting one because it appears to be working. Now, everybody hears about IP, and it's a dangerous thing to follow, and history would teach you that, except that our drilling so far has been keying on IP features, chargeability features, coupled with related resistivity features, and it seems to be working. So on the IP we acquired, I guess is a better way to say that. There's some very interesting features, not only on Cerro Blanco, but also on Arco de Oro. But what's interesting is that in this first drilling program we completed earlier in the year, we didn't get to our strongest IP anomaly. There were reasons for that, and that was surface access, which we can do, but the budget didn't allow for it because it's not going to be a cheap road going through a valley. So thankfully, an IP anomaly showed up on this line we just shot here in May, or acquired in May. And when we test that, it will give us a good feel for whether we need to move to the northeast to test the old anomaly that was the strongest one.
How much are you going to be stepping out in this drilling?
Well, the hole that we're drilling right now is about 300 meters from the hole 1 and hole 2. It's kind of a triangulation, and they're about 300 meters apart. The next hole that I was just speaking of would be about 250 meters north of that if we go to it. The other holes that we're going to drill are on the west side of the feature. We're interpreting it right now as a feature that kind of surrounds a lithocap that's quite obvious from surface. But it's early in the game. It's very early in our interpretation, and we need some more drilling, and we really need more IP and more boots on the ground. first person to admit that. We really have to get down and dirty on IP and geochem.
And that you think is going to come on the back of having seen these results and then on the back of having financed after these results, then I assume.
Well, 100% for sure after seeing results. Finance, the IP is such a small cost item. I doubt that we'll spend more than $250,000 on IP in this next pass. So, they're small ticket items. It's the drilling, obviously, that that costs an awful lot more.
Mm-hmm. When do you think you're going to have those assays in hand? How much time is it going to take you? And also, how do you think you're going to be announcing it? Hole by hole or all at once?
I think we're going to announce hole by hole. We don't enjoy preferential service in Chile. And as you could probably imagine, with copper at $5 and gold doing what it's doing, there's a lot of activity in the country. And there's a lot of majors that are conducting multi-rig programs. They tend to get better service. So we're finding that we can be 45 to 60 days for assays after submission. So, if I was to be if I was to guess, I'd say probably mid-November to late November for assays to start coming out. Mm-hmm. Now, the good news is that there would be a continual stream of those as we finish holes.
Mm-hmm. You are dealing with a lithocap there. What else, or how are the drilling conditions there now? How much efficiency are you getting per day?
Drilling is not too bad there. We're experiencing on some days 25 to 30 meters a shift, 12 hours. So we could expect 50 to 60 meters. It doesn't always go like that, of course. But yeah, it's going quite well.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out essentially if you're going to be able to get all the holes or all the assays out before the end of the year.
No,
but,
because we'll be drilling to the end of the year.
Right. If you do go to the 5 holes, that makes sense. But you're still going to have at least a couple of holes before the end of the year, though, I assume.
Oh, for sure. I believe between the middle and the end of November, they'll start coming out as we finish holes.
Yeah. Okay. And then dependent on that, because I essentially wanted to ask you, when do you go to Tres Amigos? When do you go to some of these other targets? Is that still for this year? But I suppose, as with most things, the answer would be it depends.
I don't see us going to Tres Amigos or to Caballo Muerto this year. I see us drilling at Cerro Blanco like we're doing right now, with either between 3 and 5 holes. And then I see us moving to Arco de Oro, where we're going to test some IP and surface features, meaning shallow workings, about 3.5 to 4 kilometers north of where we've drilled already. Now, I know you're going to say that sounds ridiculous as a step out. We're really testing what's going on in the northwest extension of the property. I would point out that it's not like on a whim and a prayer. We have some very strong IP results, and there's old workings there as well. So if we're fortunate enough to get some results there, we will have well over 5 kilometers of potential strike. I mean, for me to say that it continues all the way is impossible, but the potential at Arco de Oro is very, very significant. We're getting great grades there, and we'll see what happens here in this drilling program. I expect that we will be there in the beginning of December.
Oh, that's pretty soon. Okay. Talk to me maybe a little bit more, and that's, we're gonna go in depth on it with Terry, but talk to me a little bit more about Tres Amigos. Why there hasn't been much drilling there to date? When's that gonna change, or why hasn't it been drilled either by yourself or others? What's the history there?
Well, it's been mined by pick and arrow type miners, and we did sample the mine face, which is really like 3 meters from surface. It's truly not very much, but We did drill a hole underneath that. So I want to be clear that everybody knows that that hole was underneath where they did the workings. And we got some really great results. You mentioned them earlier on, but 1.5% copper, but then we also intersected about 6 meters of 5.5% copper. So um, sampling the mine face, there was about 3 meters that exceeded 14% copper. So there's something there. Now, having said that, we just haven't had we haven't gotten there yet. What's exciting about it is that there are workings there as well that extend to the river valley to the north, which is about 2 kilometers to the north. So Tres Amigos has the potential for being a very serious system.
Yeah, it'll be again. I'm really looking forward. I'm kind of scratching the surface here with you on it, but I'm really looking forward to chatting to Terry about it. Hopefully, sometime soon. What do you think is the biggest risk or challenge for San Lorenzo right now in the middle of this process that you are? I mean, you don't seem worried or pressed about money geologically, or you've come up with good results before. So what keeps you up at night?
Well, there's only one way to answer that, and that's continuing drilling results. Um, we've enjoyed good fortune so far. We hope that we can continue to enjoy that good fortune. But Mother Nature is an interesting mate or partner. So a lot of things happen, and that's just the way it is, right? So and we all know that these deposits are not continuous over kilometers and kilometers. They come, they go, they bifurcate, they swarm, they pinch, they swell. Not necessarily in the case of the porphyry targets quite as much, but of course we'll be looking for potassic core zones that are hopefully more copper rich, and right now we seem to be intercepting more in the higher area of that into maybe gold charge zones. So drilling results is really what, and it doesn't keep me up at night, by the way, but it's my number one thing about thinking about that I think about.
How's topography where you're drilling right now, and where you're going to be moving the rig next?
Cerro Blanco is the most challenging topography, and there's very serious hills and valleys in that area. So that was, by the way, our challenge in trying to get there, and prior to our building the road. What's good about it is that with this hill and valley and lots of topographical relief, the potential for these deposits to be very, very near surface is very real. Now, we are not drilling in the valleys. We're drilling up at the hills where we can access easiest, but we would only have to step out a couple 100 meters and we would be able to drill at positions where hopefully the system would be very close to surface.
Yeah.
Now at Tres Amigos, for instance, it's quite easy to get down into that system. It's reasonably easy as well at Arco de Oro. Caballo Muerto again is challenged. It's a big hill feature that we really need to get to the back side of to start doing some drilling to follow up that discovery hole. That will take a budget because there's some significant terrain involved there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Does that worry you in any way? I mean, moving around the rig or getting access to any of the ground in terms of conditions and weather and everything else around that?
Well, let me address each one of those individually. The weather is never a problem. It hasn't rained there probably in 50 years. I don't know. We're at a good elevation between 1,400 and 2,200 meters. So in other words, no issues. It never snows, never rains. Year-round access. I'd jump into one more thing, and that's the infrastructure that we have at the property. We have paved roads right to it. We have high voltage power runs right along the north end of the property, as does as does a river. And we have a couple towns that are nearby, especially El Salvador, which is a mining town. And so all the traditional, whatever you call it, yellow iron that you need is available there, and there's a workforce there. And another thing is that the Porteria smelter is very nearby and it's in operation. And to have something like that right there and a facility that's just north of us that is actually short of feed, all of those things bode very, very well for us. So to answer your question, we're not concerned about access. We're not concerned about moving the rig around. Mostly it's quite simple. Some places that will not be the case, but to solve that is just a dollars issue so that we can get the right heavy equipment in there to build pads. Hopefully I answered all of that. There might have been one other question in there that I've forgotten.
No, you're painting the picture well here. I think you said it hasn't rained there in 50 years. That's actually true. What about water though? In that case, where does your water come from?
Such a good question, right? So we all know that that's a big issue in mining. Now there is a 48-inch pipeline that runs right beside the property, but that services Codelco's operation at El Salvador. Now, can we do it? Can we access that? Well, that remains to be seen. As far as accessing river water, one shouldn't be so bold as to say that you would ever be able to do that. So let's table that. Now, there is an aquifer to the south of the property that is less than 100 meters in depth, and so we've been investigating that. Let's just say that nothing to report, but there may be access to water down south of the property, very very nearby, by the way.
Touchy subject though, water, and it is everywhere in the world, but especially in those regions. What kind of permits or community relations would you have to have in place in order to use something like that?
Clearly, permits from the Chilean government, Sernacuman. As far as neighboring communities, there really aren't any. Well, there's the two towns that I mentioned, but they're about 15 kilometers in one instance and 25 kilometers in the other, but they're mining towns. They're most of the people that live in those towns are engaged in the mining sector. We don't believe that there's going to be a problem when it comes to community relations. But then again, we're not a long ways along. We haven't gone a long ways down that path. We're still more in the exploration mode, but we feel pretty good about it because really a lot of the Chilean economy, as you well know, is tied to mining. And yeah, I can't provide any more than that.
How often or how much or do you have to go and talk to them before you're exploring? Like if this grows to up, I don't know, in forward-looking and dreamy scenarios here, but 5 rig program where you're drilling, with many rigs at the same time and disturbing a lot of the environment there. Essentially, would you have to go and consult with the community for a larger agreement, or what does that look like?
The regulatory body is Sernacuman, which is the Chilean mining regulator. So the way it works there is you submit your plans. If there's a community nearby that's impacted, then you would have to talk to them, but there isn't one in our case. The way it works is you submit your locations. They have 20 working days to provide input, and if they don't, you are free to do your plan. Now, up to 40 locations at one time are permitted under that scenario. Once you start trying to permit more than 40 locations, environmental impact assessments, et cetera, will be required. We have not had to do one yet, and I can tell you that to date, we have never had to wait the full 20 working days to get permits from Sernacuman, which is located in Copiapó, about 100 kilometers away. So it's been a good relationship. We're not displeased with what's happening there from a regulatory standpoint.
Well, luckily you're still ways away from having to disturb 40 locations, I think. Or maybe not. I mean, it depends on what you come up with this year. Um, yeah. What is G&A? I know that is about, and I understand why that is now that you and I have spoken for a bit, but it's actually on the lower end for a company of your size, about 50 grand a month. It's probably about as low as you're going to get for a public company. Is that going to go up for 2025 or 2026?
No, it'll be going significantly down. Some of those numbers are just interest cost, and we did have a couple of legacy issues that we had to deal with on the staffing side. We have very modest IR costs, and our our salaries are very modest. We do have a team in Chile that involves a landman and another geologist who sits rigs and does field work with us. And that's what constitutes the bulk of the G&A that you see there is our Chilean operations. Our Canadian operations are, if we spend over 75 grand in a year, I'd be surprised. Other than interest costs, of course, which are accrued. But yeah, we do have a team in La Serena, Chile, actually, that is very valuable and just absolutely required to conduct an exploration program. There's, as you can imagine, a lot goes on when you're going to go drilling and a lot of support that's required for it.
What about marketing? I've heard that as a criticism of San Lorenzo, like, oh, they're not out there consistently. You've started doing more of that over the last year. I met you at Beaver Creek. I know you've done a couple of interviews here and there. Do you plan on spending any more money on marketing?
No. Well, that's a pretty direct answer. Yeah. I mean, we have to make sure there's a lot of people watching this story. We're ready to live and die with the drill bit and our successes and failures. So, do we have to get the story out? Absolutely. Will there be more marketing? Yes. When I say, do we plan on spending more? Not materially more. I do intend to be at a few more of the trade type shows and doing presentations and such. And so that will increase the budget for sure. But if it comes to big promotional programs, that cost $100 or $50,000 a month and stuff like that, we're not part of that.
Mm-hmm. Too bad I'm not part of that either. I would like 50 grand a month. I'll tell you that much.
I shouldn't have said that number. I just hear some of the things,
It's true, though.
Well, some of the things I hear about, well, we raised this money, we better dedicate. Well, whatever. I'm just going to drop this for here. We don't do that.
Yeah, that's fair, and that's how I like it. That's how I approach the sector myself as well. So, what's the most fair criticism of San Lorenzo you've heard so far?
Me.
What do you mean?
Oh, I look back with fondness, actually, of a interview that Tom Woolrich and Robert Sin did about, oh boy, we're going back 3, 4, 5 months, and they were just kind of chuckling at us, and well deserved. And they say, like, there's two guys, and they're a little older, and like, what the hell? This is not what you would expect from a mining company. And they say, but on the other hand, this geologist knows what he's doing. So, and these old farts are drilling intercepts. So that, you asked me a direct question, what's the biggest criticism? That's kind of it, that we don't have what would be considered a real robust capital market / mining experience team in place that includes all the different positions that you would typically see. I don't want to take away from Terry's experience. He has been involved in the mining system for a long time and is very, he's got a lot of experience and really understands these rocks. So please don't take that answer as there's a problem with our geological side. I just think that we do need to increase the C-suite. So that would be our number one criticism.
It will be interesting to see how the company develops from here on out. Again, it was a new discovery, and everything that comes on the back of that kind of changes the company materially, and it's always a process of figuring it out, I think. So that's fair. I know you and I are going to be talking about San Lorenzo over the next couple of months, at least a couple of more times, including, again, having Terry on as well. What am I forgetting to ask you, though, for now, for this conversation? What did you come here hoping to talk about that I failed to bring up?
I think you brought things up. I mean, I'm trying to communicate the fact that we feel we have something special here, and that there are very large targets and lots of upside. We're very much on side with everyone sharing in the upside here, as we've demonstrated, and look forward. It's an exciting time for us between now and the end of the year with the drilling program going on.
I remember there's something that I have not brought up, but I did want to bring up. As someone coming into the mining space or junior mining space from oil and gas, it relatively similar, but also quite different business. What are some of the things that you really dislike about our space, and what are some of the things that you would change if you had a magic wand?
Well, let me say that I'm in no position to tell anybody what to change in the mining business, so I'm not about to do that. I would point out, however, that whilst oil and gas may seem different than mining, in a lot of ways, it's very similar as well. It's resource exploration. Yes, if you're in conventional oil, for instance, things are different because you get much more instant gratification, and you can get cash flow to fund your activities for a lot of time. But then there's a lot of projects in the oil and gas sector that are not that unsimilar to mining, like, for instance, large gas projects, whether they be either on land or offshore, that require significant infrastructure that might include offshore drilling and pipelining and all that type stuff. But it may also include that you can't export the gas, which is a thing that's kind of going on in Canada right now. And it requires that LNG facilities, for instance, be constructed. So there's a long lead time and large capital expenditure required in that as well. Another example would be heavy oil, where massive infrastructure is typically required, and there can be a long delay between the definition of a resource and its actual production. So, I mean, really, we're looking for Mother Nature's bounty, and in some cases, the delay that is obvious in mining isn't that much different than the oil and gas side, although the oil and gas side has the opportunity in different types of plays to reward you quicker with cash flow. But really, I think a lot of people listening or that have been in the mining and the oil and gas business would kind of smile and say, yeah, it's a lot the same. And once you have it in your blood, it's kind of there. And I find myself in that position.
It's been a pleasure, Al. Thank you so much for this introduction of San Lorenzo, and thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
I thought it was great, and I really appreciate you having me. Thanks very much.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they are necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know, and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage. which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias, and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. So unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."